represent a constituency in the East End of London that has been a haven for political dissidents since the Huguenots in the 19th century. And in the present day, we have Kurds, we have Algerians, we have Nigerian dissidents. And it is because this legislation could potentially affect the lives and liberties of many of my constituents that I'm rising to speak. And I have to say, as others have said before me, that it is quite wrong that we should be discussing legislation of this gravity in the early hours of the morning. It should have been a separate bill, it should have come forward in October, and it should have proper scrutiny. And as my friend and colleague, the Chairman of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, put with such cogency a few minutes earlier, the arguments of urgency that apply to the earlier sections of this bill in relation to Northern Ireland do not apply to clauses 5, 6 and 7. There is no reason at all why we should be discussing these clauses at 6 in the morning. So I am glad to be able to speak in support of a set of amendments that have been moved so ably in the past hour or so. And I don't wish to go over arguments that have been already made, but just let me say this, that precisely because the arguments of urgency do not apply, it seems to me that tagging on these three clauses is sheer opportunism by Home Office officials. It has all the hallmarks of something that was been dusted off and tagged on to the Northern Ireland proposals. A lot has been made of the safety mechanism provided by the Attorney General and how the Attorney General will have to take questions of public interest into account. A lot has been made about how we should not fetter the Attorney General in examining public interest. But I want to know, ministers haven't told me, precisely what aspect of the public interest will the Attorney General give most weight to? Will he be looking at public interest in relation to arms sales? Or will he be looking at public interest in relation to international good governance? Will he be looking at the public interest in relation to an ethical foreign policy? Or will he be looking at the public interest in not upsetting people who are big buyers of British goods? No one here we have the utmost confidence in the current Attorney General. And no one on these benches is seeking to fetter him, but we do feel he could benefit from more scrutiny of this legislation and more guidance and more clarity as to what issues he should be looking at. This legislation, it is not clear how it will work. I don't believe it's even clear to ministers and officials how it will work. I think the lack of scrutiny and the way it's being bulldozed through is entirely lamentable. And this is legislation which could mean, in the coming months and years, that some of the most repressive regimes in the world could reach their long arms into Britain and take action against people whose only real crime is that they are in political opposition to regimes which do not have the ordinary democratic processes that we know. I think the way these particular three clauses have been brought forward is quite wrong. I think they're ill-drafted and I think they're ill-thought out, and there is simply no justification for serious legislation of this nature to be brought forward in this way. And I'm glad to have had the opportunity briefly to give my support to the set of very important clauses being moved this morning.